So, hi everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of Vice Versa, a series of Instagram interviews where I get to ask questions to industry leaders whom we admire here at Copenhagen Fashion Week. My guests in these series are people who we're not only lucky to meet once in a while here in Copenhagen when they join us for Fashion Week, but it's remarkable individuals who are putting their mark on the fashion industry, leaving us and you guys hopefully also inspired and also informed. And on that note, I'm thrilled to introduce Emily Chan, the sustainability editor of Vogue Global. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Cecilia. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you today.
Well, thank you. Likewise, very thrilled about it. And Emily, it's I think this is funny because today, or usually, you're the one interviewing me, and I hope that you feel comfortable about reversing roles today and letting me asking you the questions.
Well, yeah, I must admit, it always does feel a bit strange to not be the one interviewing, but no, I'm delighted to be here and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I'm also completely out of my comfort zone today, so
No, you're great.
great. But before we start, I think I should just put a few more words to why I wanted to chat with you today. Because to those of you who don't know, Emily Chan, as I said, the sustainability editor of Vogue Global, and I believe you've been in this position for about a year and a half. And Emily is a person that I admire and that we admire here at Copenhagen Fashion Week because I think you're in such a crucial role as sustainability editor of Vogue Global. So bringing sustainability to the forefront of your readership, your global readership, and more conscious thinking, pushing for more conscious thinking amongst a global audience. So yeah, so that's why I'm really happy to be speaking with you today. But maybe Emily, you can just maybe put a few more words to who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yes, as you've said, I'm sustainability editor at Vogue Global, and my role is essentially covering sustainability in fashion and climate issues more generally for our global audience. And yeah, I feel very lucky to be able to do this role because yeah, it's such a crucial time for the industry, I feel, and these topics are so important, more important than ever potentially. So yeah, I feel really lucky to be able to do this role.
That's fantastic. So Emily, let's dive into the interview itself. And my first question is, if we rewind time a bit, if you could tell us about what shaped your interest in fashion and sustainability, and if you remember one specific moment that took you down the path which eventually led to where you are today.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question because, even a few years back, sustainability editor wasn't really a role that existed. And so I can't really say that it's something that I've always wanted to do because, it didn't really exist when I was growing up. But what I would say is that I've always been interested in fashion. I've always been concerned about the climate crisis, but I feel like I was one of those people who wasn't really sure what to do about it. It felt like such a huge problem that I couldn't really change. So I feel really lucky to be able to do this role that kind of combines, those interests and, my concerns about social justice, and really kind of hopefully make an impact in terms of raising people's, raising the profile of some of these issues and drawing attention to them. Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't say that there was one particular moment. Actually, it's been something that's kind of built over time, and yeah, this role kind of came about that really allowed me to kind of use my skills and hopefully make an impact.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and I think it sounds somewhat familiar to also my journey because there wasn't that particular moment which led me to like, oh, eye opener, I want to go into sustainability and fashion, but I think and we're probably not the only ones, so I also hope that we have tons of viewers today who can relate to this position where you're both enjoying a fashion, a product which we know has an immense impact on the planet that we live on, be conscious about it. I wouldn't say feel shame about it, because we should be able to enjoy fashion, but we should be conscious of the impact that it leaves, and should hopefully lead to better choices and more conscious thinking. So
yeah, no, I really agree. And it's actually something I've written about as well, this idea of eco guilt, because I think that makes people disengage, I think, and I think actually, realizing that there isn't such thing as, the perfect, I guess, environmentalist, or, the perfect conscious shopper, perhaps, but kind of just being aware of it and being really engaged in the issues, that's what's going to make a difference, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Emily, I know what you're doing. I know the articles that you're writing, but I don't know what a typical day looks like for you. So to take us into your office and tell us what happens, or office. I don't know if you're at home still.
Yeah, no, we're still, we've been working from home for more than a year now, which is quite crazy to think, actually. But yeah, I guess it depends on the day a lot. I think I like to start the day kind of catching up with the headlines and kind of really finding out and keeping up to date what's going on with the fashion industry, catching up with emails. And then, I'll have meetings both internally, and I have calls externally, interviews externally. And then the rest of my day is really spent kind of writing, editing, commissioning. And so, that's kind of the main things that I'll be doing in a typical day. And obviously that changes a lot. Sometimes I'll be doing things like this and speaking on panels. And but in terms of a typical day, that's kind of the sort of stuff I'll be getting on with.
Fantastic. And are you the writer who stays up long in the night, or are you structured and are able to do it within working hours?
It depends, to be honest with you. I think that during the pandemic, it's been more difficult, I guess, to maintain those strict boundaries. I sometimes find that waking up slightly earlier and kind of getting a chunk of writing done then is helpful. But I try to keep a good work-life balance as much as possible.
Yeah, it's important. And I think maybe that's also one of the things that the pandemic showed us. So, Emily, in your opinion, not the biggest challenge, but some of the biggest challenges that the industry is facing in regards to speeding up sustainability efforts, and then maybe also if you could talk about what are some of the challenges that consumers are facing.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the industry, it's really getting brands to take sustainability seriously and act on it urgently. And I think that is the main thing we need to work on now, because I think people know that it's an issue, but it's how do we make sure that sustainability is seen as a top priority, and really get brands to act on that. Because I think I think there's been a lot of
between behavior and action.
I think so. I think we've seen a lot of talk. We've seen targets being set, for example, cutting emissions by 2030, and obviously that kind of target varies from company to company, but it's not quite clear yet how we're going to get there. And I think sustainability needs to be seen as the main priority, and not an added extra, or something that's kind of marketable. I think it really has to be the front and center, and we've got to get kind of CEOs and industry leaders to really see sustainability like that, and that's when we'll see real action. I think that's kind of the barrier at the moment in terms of the urgency of action that's needed. I think people are waking up to the fact that it's a problem, but not necessarily seeing how urgent the action needs to be.
I very much agree with you, and I think there's been a tendency for too long for sustainability to be perceived as, if you put out a collection that's made up of sustainable fabrics, then you can tick off the box of making sustainable fashion. And to me, it just doesn't do it. You have to have a holistic approach, and you have to make sure that everything along your value chain is not only thought through, but also that you're taking action and doing improvements. throughout the entire value chain.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I don't think it's easy by any means, but I think kind of recognizing the scale of the problem, and as you say, that it can't just be, there's not going to be one easy fix, but kind of recognizing the scale and recognizing the urgency that the change needs to happen. I think that's a really crucial turning point we kind of need.
Yeah. And what do you think is the biggest challenge for consumers?
I think for consumers, navigating sustainability is such a minefield. I think there's a lot of kind of mixed messages. There's a lot of marketing, as I kind of mentioned, a lot of buzzwords that are used, and it's hard for consumers to really kind of, know, even if they are trying to buy more consciously, knowing really like where to begin. I think there's a lot of information that needs to be waded through, a lot of research that needs to be done. So I think sustainability needs to be more accessible for consumers. I think that they need to be given information in the clearest way possible. And I think, I really strongly believe that the onus shouldn't just be on consumers. Brands should be making as many sustainable options available to consumers as possible. So I think, I think it is a challenge. And I think obviously we are seeing a lot of consumers being more interested and wanting to shop more sustainably, and, looking into buying secondhand and rental and things like that. But I think, for the average consumer, navigating sustainability is still quite challenging, and I really do think that needs to change.
Yeah. And speaking of change, what is your biggest aspiration for the fashion ecosystem?
It's a difficult one because obviously we know that there are so many challenges, but I think right now what I would say is cutting CO2 emissions. I think, in terms of making sure that fashion plays its role in tackling the climate crisis, we really need to get those CO2 emissions down, and down as quickly as possible. And obviously there are other areas that we really need to look at. I think that's one of the most urgent. I also think that in terms of the kind of social impact, making sure that, garment workers are all paid a living wage and have safe working conditions, that's also crucial. And those kind of issues have been highlighted throughout the pandemic. So I guess those are the two main kind of focus areas, I would say. But obviously there are so many others that the fashion kind of needs to look at. Yeah.
So let's go into fashion weeks, because now you have the chance to tell me that the cold truth. No, I want to ask you, what is your biggest fashion week like pet peeve, coming from like a sustainable perspective? Anything that annoys you about fashion weeks?
It's a difficult one. I don't know if it would count as a pet peeve, but one thing I wrote about last Fashion Month was the fact that sustainability still wasn't treated as a priority during last Fashion Month. And that's something I really noticed, that maybe, in the past few seasons before that, we had seen a lot of talk about sustainability, and it did seem to drop off quite a lot last season. I guess, obviously we were in the pandemic, and that probably affected things. But I think that's the thing I struggle with, when sustainability isn't put at the front and center, when it is such an urgent priority for the fashion industry.
It's funny that you mention it, because it's one of the things that really annoys me. For example, I remember a reporter once. It was a Danish TV reporter who asked who came up and to do an interview with me during Fashion Week, and he said, "So I heard that the theme of this particular fashion week is sustainability," and I was like, "No, we're not gonna package one season in sustainability." And but obviously, I totally also understand where he came from, and why he maybe misunderstood our intentions, because they were new and we were just getting started and about to launch our 3-year sustainability action plan and all of that. But I was almost offended that someone could think that we would, because it would be complete greenwashing to just call one particular season, "Oh, let's talk about sustainability this season, and the next season we can talk about diversity in the industry." So but yeah, I very much agree with you.
Yeah, and I think the work that you're doing at Copenhagen Fashion Week is so crucial because that's what really will accelerate change within the industry. I think, that action plan is so important, and it shows that the roles that fashion weeks, can have in terms of making change. And yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I'm so delighted that's, that you're working on that.
And I'm really happy that you think so. And that was maybe also my next question. Not that I wanted to get that particular answer, but but what, the biggest change that you see happening in fashion weeks, and if there are any, positive changes that you're seeing, and you don't have to answer anything about Copenhagen Fashion Week, you can talk just in general.
I think that we have seen, more initiatives around sustainability. You've got the Institute of Positive Fashion at London Fashion Week with BFC. And I think that kind of information and knowledge sharing is so crucial within the industry. So I think that's really positive. I guess what's been interesting during the pandemic is kind of this move to digital. And I wonder what impact that will have on fashion weeks going forward, whether there will be more of a hybrid format, whether, we'll return to purely physical. I think that's interesting. And I think that is probably the direction that fashion weeks are moving more in terms of maybe experimenting more with the format. Maybe sparked on, by the pandemic and kind of having to do things in a different way. I think that's really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see, what the kind of cadence is when things start to kind of open up a bit more and return back to normal.
Yeah, and speaking of normal, what I'm sensing is that most people in the industry are wanting to, and I think the word of, or the phrase going back to normal is so like uninnovative, and it doesn't really, guide you in a new direction, or it doesn't lead you to improvement. But I think that a lot of people feel, or maybe have been, at least I have been kind of reassured of, of the importance of also meeting physically and the benefits of meeting physically. Of course, experiencing fashion live, but also having conversations and relations that you can build on.
Yeah, I think so. And I think those connections will always be so important to the fashion industry, and being able to see clothes in person. And as you say, having those discussions in person, I don't think that will change. I guess it might be a question of, is there more of a balance that can be struck, that kind of thing. And obviously, in terms of the fashion week calendar, it's not just spring, summer and autumn, winter. We have lots of shows in between as well. So I think, yeah, the balance of the overall schedule, it'll be interesting to see if that changes at all, and how people approach, showing those kind of in between collections.
I very much agree. So I think this is one of my last questions for you, Emily. So how do you think that you as an editor, or we as a fashion week, can accelerate sustainability in the fashion industry? And a side question, who else would you like to see doing it?
That's a really good question. And obviously, that's something I ask myself quite a lot in terms of kind of the role that I can play. I think I see my role in, a couple of, I guess, different parts. And one of them is educating consumers and our readers. And I think, really giving them access to information and kind of highlighting some of these issues. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think the onus should be on consumers, but I think that, consumers and readers as part of a wider movement can be really powerful. And I think that is really important, and making sure that they have, the information they need to make more informed choices. I think the second part is, holding brands and the fashion industry accountable, and really calling for change, I guess, throughout the industry, and raising awareness of some of the issues that do need to be tackled, and really making sure that sustainability is at the forefront of people's minds, and is something that people are thinking about and acting on. I think that's those are the two kind of influences I think that I can have. And then in terms of fashion weeks, I think I think the sort of model that you're doing at Copenhagen Fashion Week is really effective, and I would love to see more fashion weeks doing that, because I think it's a way of really engaging brands, of ensuring that action is actually being taken, of really being able to accelerate action. And I think it shows that fashion weeks do have power, and power to affect change in this way. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I think beyond that,
and that was also, I mean, that was the purpose of doing what we decided to do, was say, okay, we have quite a powerful platform already. We enjoy a great deal of attention, media coverage, attendance from people who are influencing other people. So how can we use that role in a more meaningful or a more effective way? And to begin with, I remember maybe saying, um, yeah, I think on internal workshops, I was thinking, yeah, but we can't really dictate how brands should do business. We can dictate how they should do a show or how they should be involved in Fashion Week. And then I was like, no, let's try to not dictate how they do business, but let's try to at least set some minimum standards for how they do business, and say, and if you're not living up to those minimum standards, then then Copenhagen Fashion Week is not going to be your arena. Then you can show somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that sends such a powerful message, and I do hope that more fashion weeks follow suit. And you asked me kind of who else has a role to play. I really do think that legislation and regulation is crucial, and I think that will be the driver of change, and it will really accelerate change, because I think the likes of Copenhagen Fashion Week can kind of set standards, and people can set standards, but I think when it comes into law, that's when brands will be forced to act, and yeah, I think that will be a crucial turning point.
Yeah, very much agree with the regulation and the political system. So a last question: is there any tips or piece of advice that you can give to our viewers today on if they're not already engaged in transitioning more sustainably, how they can engage, and if there are any maybe low-hanging fruit, especially?
I think thinking more about where your clothes come from is a really good place to start, and realizing that everything we wear comes from something, and understanding the impact of our clothes. I think that is a crucial starting point, because I think that although it sounds quite basic, I don't think that is kind of mainstream yet. Still, I think we're having a growing, there's a growing group of consumers that are really concerned about these issues, but I think your average consumer probably walks into a shop and doesn't really think about the impact of the clothes they're buying. So I think that is a good starting point. I think kind of considering every purchase, I think that again is once you've kind of started to understand the impact of the clothes, considering each purchase that you're making, how long will you wear it, how long will you keep it for, do you really need it? I think those kind of basic questions can actually be quite impactful. And then I think beyond that, kind of to navigate sustainability, I think looking more into what brands are actually doing, reading beyond the buzzwords and actually looking at their policies. And obviously that takes time and research. And obviously, as I said before, I don't think the onus should be on the consumers, but I think that, that there is a role we can all play in terms of trying to get brands to take action, and holding brands accountable. And I think, just being engaged in these issues, the bigger a movement that we can have in terms of having conscious consumers, I think that can be really powerful. So I guess those would be my tips, just being engaged.
Emily, thank you so much for doing this interview with me today. I think it went super well. I think you're a very good interviewee. I don't know about my role as interviewer, but I hope that you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's been a really enjoyable conversation, and it's always great to discuss these issues with people who really care about these subjects. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
Likewise. Well, that's it for today, and I want to thank those of you who watched the interview. Thank you for tuning in, and looking forward to revealing our next guest. And hope to see you again. Bye.